I'm Colin, and this is Sci-Fi Deep Dive. So here we go, probably one of the most disliked videos I'm going to post so far. 2 years ago, the launch of Star Wars Battlefront 2 was probably one of the most disastrous video game launches in recent memory. It launched amid a flurry of controversy, centering around EA's prominent placement of microtransactions and their progression system being built to be pay to win. But that was 2 years ago. The game has had 2 years to develop and grow, and now we're going to ask ourselves the question, is it worth buying yet? Before I get into this, I should point out I value games a lot for their single-player experience. I play the multiplayer, but the bread and butter for me is the single player. So I'm really going to be able to speak to that. I've dabbled in the multiplayer, and I'll touch on that, but my main concern was always single-player offline experiences. So before the game launched, we were promised a long single-player campaign telling a story in the Star Wars universe, along with a expanded version of skirmish mode, which was added late to the first EA Battlefront. For those of you who don't know, skirmish mode in Battlefront 1 allowed players to play Walker Assault and Starfighter Assault offline, which added a significant amount of offline content to a game that was really, really lacking it. Battlefront 2 launched, however, with a single-player campaign that was playable in an afternoon, a very small version of skirmish called Arcade, which only offered 10v10 bot matches, and then a multiplayer that was broken from launch mainly due to its pay-to-win aspects and other features put in to try to sell microtransactions. So after 2 years of patching and fixing the game up, is it worth buying now? Personally, my answer to that question is yes. Now, before you go down and dislike it and write something in the comments, hear me out. They've put a lot of work into this game, which they're pretty much making no money off of on the back end. The game's sales figures were terrible. The scandal destroyed the game's launch, and then even though they would re-add microtransactions later for cosmetics, they would never make the money they planned to make on microtransactions. Now, knowing EA, I would expect them to drop the game. To be like, well, this game is not profitable anymore, cut it. But instead, DICE has been working on and adding things to the game for the past 2 years now, including DLC tied to every major Star Wars movie, and even some things tying into TV shows to come out since the game's launch. This includes Last Jedi and Solo. Of course, a lot of what's been added has been added to the multiplayer. New maps, new game modes, things that tie into Solo and The Last Jedi. DICE has been putting in work there, but there have been additions other places. When Last Jedi came out, they added a small mini-campaign, like 3 or 4 missions. They've since added a new instant action mode just earlier this year, which really kind of put it over the top and brought those big battles you see in multiplayer into a single-player space. Now, I will say some of the bots do need a little bit of tweaking there, but ultimately, the game is enjoyable offline as well as online. Gameplay-wise, it feels a lot like the old Battlefronts with a little bit of modern Battlefield, what we're used to from DICE, mixed in. As far as the multiplayer goes and the microtransactions that caused all the scandal, as far as I'm aware, they have not been re-added into the game. Instead, we got microtransactions that can buy loot boxes that'll simply only give you cosmetic items. Now, that's a whole nother problem, and there's still the loot box issue, but as far as a pay-to-win system, it's been completely reworked, and I don't see any sign of a pay-to-win system in this game. On top of that, the amount of effort put into DICE on a game that financially is, well, a failure, really shows a commitment to this IP, which I think deserves a lot of respect. The originals were some of the best Star Wars games ever made. One more thing, because I know this was a big criticism of the first EA Battlefront. Last year, at the end of the year, they doubled down on the Clone Wars stuff. And now, I would almost say there's more Clone Wars stuff in the game than anything else. So for those of you who didn't like the first one because it didn't have any stuff tying to the prequels, it's all in the new one now. It took them a long time, but it's in there. So overall, I know this game was unpopular. It didn't launch very well. It was a mess when it launched. But 2 years down the line, after 2 years of trying desperately to patch it back into something that's playable, I would say it's been fixed in a lot of ways. It still has its problems. It still has bugs and glitches, and it still has some things that are a little questionable, but all in all, I think this game is worth checking out, especially if you're a Star Wars fan, if you're looking for something Star Wars to play that's less story-driven, like Jedi Fallen Order. I can highly recommend looking into Battlefront 2 again. It's been 2 years, and they've spent those 2 years hard at work patching the game into something that's not quite as unbearable. I sincerely hope that the problems that this game saw doesn't dash any chance of us getting a Battlefront 3. I think the Battlefront franchise is, like I said, one of my favorite game franchises in the Star Wars IP, and I really hope that this isn't the death of it again. So if you enjoyed what you saw here today and you want to see more of me or just hear more sci-fi discussions, head down below, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell icon so you can get notified when I upload new videos. Also, hit the like button, and I'm almost scared to ask this, tell me in the comments what you thought of Battlefront 2, especially if you've played it recently since all the updates that they've added, and your thoughts on the game. This has been Sci-Fi Deep Dive. I'm Colin, and I will see you next time.